So there's a sentence that Robert Jobson wrote this week, and that sentence hardly received any attention. But for people who do not know, Robert Jobson is the king's man. I call him the king's man. He has always been on the side of the king. And he's always been one of the first to come out and defend the king. And while he tries to appear reasonable, and he's usually very calm, he has been known maybe once or twice to lose it against Harry and Meghan. So this particular sentence that he tweeted actually came as a surprise. And what is it, you might ask me? So as one of Britain's most established royal biographers and commentators, this is what he wrote. And this is following the week that the press reported that despite spending around 370 million over 10 years refurbishing Buckingham Palace, the king and the queen and maybe the heir, they have no interest in living at Buckingham Palace. So all that money essentially for nothing. And Robert Jobson actually tweeted this, and I'm going to read it. He said, "When the huge bill for the palace refurbishment was first costed, officials told a press conference that I attended that the palace would stay occupied. They insisted that the sovereign and those who followed her would live there as always. He sat through those briefings. That assurance has quietly been abandoned." So in a nutshell, Robert Jobson said he was there at the press briefing that told all of them that the cost, the huge cost for refurbishing Buckingham Palace is worth it because the late monarch, the Queen Elizabeth, and her descendants or other monarchs that follow will live in Buckingham Palace. And that is now not the case. And this is not the first time that the palace will do this. They tell us one thing, and then years later, they say something else. And this deception has been going on for as long as many can remember. Now, the refurbishment of Buckingham Palace has a cost. And depending on which currency you use, it's approximately £369 million or $530 million. Yes. And it's been funded through the sovereign grant, which is drawn from Crown Estate profits, and it's allocated by our Parliament, which means it is public money. It has been that way for the last 10 years, and the refurbishment is due to be completed in March 2027. And that when the refurbishment was announced and costed, palace officials, they held a press conference, and Robert Jobson was in that room. And those officials told the assembled journalists explicitly and on the record that the sovereign and those who followed would live in Buckingham Palace as always. And the refurbishment was justified, at least in part, by that assurance. And it was the assurance that this is the monarch's home and it would remain so. Now, as you know, King Charles, he became king in September 2022. And he remained at Clarence House. And a palace spokesperson said at the time that it was expected that the necessary works would be completed for their majesties to take up residence in 2027. Last week, it was confirmed that the king and his queen will never move in. They will remain at Clarence House. And the other brother has also said he has no intention of moving in either. So the palace will function as the operational headquarters, an event venue, and a tourist attraction. And a spokesperson said, "It's the beating heart of the monarchy, just not its resting head. See, I love these people. Honestly, I want to learn from them, and I tell you why. When it comes to the use of language, superb. When it comes to the art of deception in plain sight, superb. The beating heart, not just the resting head. Who comes up with this shit? Seriously, who comes up with this? This is why people do not trust the monarchy, and this is why only 40-something% of people in the UK support the monarchy. Because these shenanigans is what they are known for. And to be fair, it just didn't start with the current king and queen and the heir. It's been that way for centuries. And it's always a push and pull with the public. One minute the public love them, the next minute the public don't love them. One minute they're being slated in the press, the next minute they're being praised in the press. Especially when the press then finds a common enemy. They band up with the monarchy and they wail on the common enemy. And usually they're always bashing Harry and Meghan. And we know in the next few weeks they're going to ramp up the hate to cover for the fact that over £369 million has been spent on a refurbishment only for the family not to live there. So when they say Buckingham Palace is the operational headquarters, it means that they'll be paying for staff, they'll be paying for a shed load of, pen pushers, administrators and pen pushers behind the scenes who live separately from the monarch and the heir. How wonderful. This is incredible. So essentially, when the heir said he was going to work from home, he really meant he was going to work from home. I love it. I absolutely love it. So this is now Robert Jobson, a staunch monarchist, someone who literally boasted about going on a plane with the king to the US. He is now calling them out. And I never thought I'd see the day. So yeah, I don't even know what to think of this, because I think to me this is just absurd. But it kind of reminded me of something else. There was a time when the other brother made a throwaway comment about Africa. I think it was when he was talking about the war in Ukraine, and he said something about, being upset about seeing, blonde, blue-eyed people at war, blonde, blue-eyed children, when this is what you expect of places like Africa, that you don't see such the devastation of war. You don't tend to see it in Europe, but you tend to see it in places like Africa. And he made a throwaway comment, and one of the reporters, I believe it might even be Richard Eden, he then reported it, and they told him he didn't hear what he heard, right? He kind of tried to argue, but then he decided not to argue because obviously access, and he didn't want his press pass to be revoked. And more importantly, he didn't want to be thrown out of the WhatsApp group like Tom Sykes was. So he then kind of backtracked. But it kind of reminds me of that. This is what they do. They brief one thing, and then when that turns out to be a lie, they then say something else. And even the reporters are baffled, and they're like, but we know what we heard. And they're like, no, you didn't hear it. And then eventually the reporters go, actually, maybe we didn't hear it. This is the game they play. And Harry, he alluded to something like this in his book, Spare. He alluded to the briefings. He alluded to the invisible contract. And here, in plain sight, Robert Jobson is calling them out, and nobody in the press is saying anything. And by the way, he's actually disabled his comments anyway, ever since the last kerfuffle about the Sussexes and a lot of Sussex Squad members were giving him what for. And he also started deliberately baiting the squad for engagement, and it just descended. Anyway, he's disabled his comments, so it would have been interesting to see what people would be responding to when it came to what he said. But I just find it interesting that even their staunchest defender is actually calling them out and saying, this is what you told us in a briefing. I was there in a briefing, and now you are changing your tune. So, liar, liar, pants on fire. And like I always say, they are sitting on a throne of lies. But then again, let me know what you guys think in the comments, please. My name's Elizabeth. I'm the author of The Luxpreneur, and for more insights like these, please like, share, comment, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And to support my work in holding truth to power, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Elizabeth Slaru, or you can get a copy of my book, The Luxpreneur, from Amazon, Waterstones, or Barnes & Noble.